in a quiet town where secrets hide in every corner. One family's nightmare began with a single, chilling whisper that no one could ignore. The Thompson family had been looking for a new home. For months, David Thompson worked as an accountant at a small firm downtown, handling numbers and spreadsheets all day. He was a practical man in his mid-40s, with short brown hair that was starting to gray at the temples and glasses that he adjusted often when he was thinking hard. His wife, Laura, was a part-time nurse at the local clinic, helping with checkups and vaccinations. She had long blonde hair tied back in a ponytail most days, and she always wore comfortable scrubs even when she wasn't at work. Their daughter, Mia, was 13 years old, just starting high school, with braces on her teeth and a backpack full of books about animals, because she dreamed of being a vet one day. Ben, the youngest at 8, was energetic but shy, always carrying around his favorite toy car, a red fire truck that made siren noises when you pressed a button. They had lived in a cramped apartment in the city for years, but the rent kept going up, and the noise from the streets below made it hard to sleep. So when they saw the ad for the old house on Maple Lane in Willow Creek, it seemed perfect. The town was small, with tree-lined streets, a grocery store that everyone knew, and a park where kids played after school. The house itself was a 2-story, Victorian, built in the early 1900s, with faded blue paint, a wraparound porch, and a big backyard overgrown with weeds. It had 4 bedrooms, a basement for storage, and an attic that could be turned into a playroom. The price was low because it needed some fixes like new plumbing and fresh paint, but David figured he could handle most of it himself on weekends. On moving day, which was a sunny Saturday in early fall, the family loaded up their old minivan and a rented truck. David drove the truck, carefully navigating the highways out of the city, while Laura followed in the van with the kids. Mia listened to music on her headphones, staring out the window at the changing scenery from tall buildings to open fields, then played with his fire truck, making quiet whooshing sounds as he pretended to put out imaginary fires. "Are we there yet?" he asked every 20 minutes, and Laura would smile and say, "Almost, buddy." They arrived around noon. The real estate agent, a cheerful woman named Mrs. Patel, was waiting with the keys. She handed them over with a big smile. "Welcome to your new home. It's got so much character." David thanked her and started unloading boxes labeled kitchen and living room. Laura took the kids inside first. The front door creaked a little as it opened, revealing a hallway with wooden floors that needed polishing. To the left was the living room, empty except for dust bunnies in the corners. Straight ahead, the kitchen had outdated cabinets and a stove that looked like it hadn't been used in years. Mia ran upstairs to claim her room. She chose the one at the end of the hall, with a window overlooking the backyard. It had peeling wallpaper with faint flower patterns, but she imagined hanging posters of her favorite bands, then picked the room next to hers, excited because it had a closet big enough to hide in during games. Laura called them down for lunch sandwiches she had packed in a cooler. They sat on the floor in the living room, eating off paper plates, laughing about how echoey the empty house sounded. After lunch, the real work began. David carried in the heavy furniture, the couch, the dining table, the beds. He huffed and puffed up the stairs, sweat dripping down his face. Laura unpacked the kitchen boxes, stacking plates in the cabinets and wiping down the counters with a cloth. She found an old spoon in one of the drawers, rusted and bent, and tossed it in the trash. Mia helped by setting up her room, making her bed with fresh sheets and arranging her books on a shelf. Ben mostly ran around, exploring every nook, but he stayed away from the basement door because it was dark down there. As the sun started to set, they ordered pizza from the local place in town. The delivery guy, a teenager with acne, chatted about how quiet the neighborhood was. "Not much happens around here," he said, taking the cash. The family ate on the porch, watching the streetlights flicker on. It was peaceful. with crickets chirping and a cool breeze rustling the leaves. "This is going to be great," David said, putting his arm around Laura. She nodded, feeling hopeful. That first night, they all slept in their new beds. The house was still mostly unpacked, with boxes everywhere, but it felt like home already. Mia fell asleep reading a book about dogs. Ben clutched his fire truck. David and Laura talked quietly in their room about plans for the weekend, mowing the lawn, painting the walls. But around midnight, Laura woke up to a sound. It was faint, like a murmur from downstairs. She sat up, listening. It stopped, so she figured it was the house settling, like old houses do. She lay back down and drifted off. In the morning, no one mentioned anything unusual. David made coffee in the new kitchen, using the old machine they brought. Laura fried eggs and bacon, the smell filling the air. Mia complained about having to walk to the new school bus stop, but Ben was excited for his first day at the elementary school nearby. The week passed in a blur of routines. David commuted to work, leaving early and coming back around 6. He spent evenings fixing small things, like a leaky faucet in the bathroom. Laura worked 3 days at the clinic, helping patients with blood pressure checks and flu shots. On her off days, she grocery shopped at the market, buying milk, bread, apples, and cereal. Mia adjusted to school, making a friend named Sophie, who sat next to her in math class. They talked about homework and boys. Ben came home with drawings from art class, sticking them on the fridge with magnets. One afternoon, while Laura was folding laundry in the living room, she noticed a cold draft. It came from the hallway, even though all windows were closed. She checked the front door lock tight, shrugging it off. She continued folding shirts and socks. That evening, during dinner spaghetti and meatballs, Ben said, "I heard someone talking in my room today." David laughed. Probably the TV from next door. But there was no TV on next door. The neighbors were an elderly couple who went to bed early. Mia started noticing things too. Her books would be moved slightly on the shelf, not where she left them. She thought Ben was playing tricks, but he swore he wasn't. David inspected the house more, looking for drafts or pests. He went down to the basement, flashlight in hand. It was dusty, with old boxes left by previous owners, maybe junk like broken chairs and faded photos. He didn't find any mice or holes, so he came back up and locked the door. Days turned into weeks. The family settled in. They had a barbecue in the backyard one Sunday, inviting the neighbors. The elderly couple, Mr. and Mrs. Harlow, came over with a pie. Mr. Harlow mentioned the house's history casually. "Been here since the 1920s. A family named Ellis lived here. Sad story, the husband died in an accident in the attic, fell through the floor or something. But that was ages ago." Laura felt a chill but changed the subject to the weather. Life continued dully. David balanced the checkbook at the kitchen table, numbers adding up neatly. Laura scheduled doctor appointments for the kids. Mia did homework for hours, solving algebra problems step by step. Ben watched cartoons after school, eating snacks like crackers and cheese. But the murmurs returned. One night, David heard them while brushing his teeth, soft words he couldn't make out, like a radio tuned low. He rinsed his mouth and went to bed, telling himself it was nothing. Then, one morning, Laura found a door open that she knew she had closed the attic door at the top of the stairs. She climbed up, the steps creaking under her weight. The attic was empty except for cobwebs and a single window letting in dim light. She closed the door firmly and went back down. The day at work, she felt distracted, spilling a cup of coffee on her desk. The kids started having trouble sleeping. Mia would wake up feeling watched, pulling the covers over her head. Ben left his light on, saying the shadows moved funny. David and Laura discussed it over breakfast one day. "Maybe it's just the new place," Laura said. David nodded. "We'll get used to it." But deep down, a sense of unease grew. Objects began to shift more noticeably. A vase on the mantel moved an inch overnight. keys left on the counter ended up in a drawer. The family rationalized it forgetfulness. From the move, they went about their days. School buses, office meetings, grocery lists. Willow Creek remained quiet, with leaves falling as autumn deepened. One evening, as the family watched a movie in the living room, an old comedy to lighten, the mood picture frame on the wall tilted suddenly. No one was near it. They stared. Then David got up and straightened it. Nail must be loose, he muttered. But the nail was firm. The night, the murmurs were louder, almost like a whisper saying mine. Laura heard it clearly, but didn't wake. David, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if they had made a mistake moving here. The Thompson family tried to settle into their routine in the old Victorian house on Maple Lane, but the strange occurrences began to pile up, chipping away at their sense of normalcy. David woke up early each morning, brewing coffee in the kitchen while the sun barely peeked through the curtains. He'd sit at the dining table, checking emails on his laptop, calculating expenses for the month mortgage, groceries, gas for the minivan. Laura was up next, making oatmeal or toast for the kids before heading to the clinic for her shifts. Mia dragged herself out of bed, complaining about early classes, while Ben bounced around, clutching his red fire truck, ready for school. Life in Willow Creek moved slowly, with neighbors waving as they walked dogs or mowed lawns. But the house felt different, like it was watching them. One Tuesday morning, Laura was folding laundry in the living room, stacking Mia's jeans and Ben's cartoon-themed shirts. She heard a faint scratching sound from the wall behind her. She paused, holding a sock, and listened. It stopped. She shook her head, thinking it was a mouse, and continued folding. Later that day, while wiping down the kitchen counters after lunch grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, she found a glass in the sink that she was sure she put in the dishwasher. "David, are you messing with me?" she called out, half joking. He was in the garage, tinkering with a broken shelf, and shouted back, "Not me." Laura frowned, but let it go, scrubbing the glass and placing it back in the cabinet. Mia was struggling at school. Her new friend Sophie was nice, but Mia felt distracted. In science class, she doodled in her notebook instead of listening to the teacher talk about ecosystems. She drew the house, its tall windows and creaky porch, without knowing why. At home, she noticed her things weren't where she left them. Her favorite pen, the one with blue ink and a dog charm, disappeared from her desk and showed up on the windowsill. She asked Ben if he took it, but he was busy building a fort out of couch cushions in the living room, shaking his head no. "Maybe you dropped it," he said, pushing his fire truck across the floor. Ben was starting to act quieter than usual. At dinner one night, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans. He pushed his food around his plate instead of eating. "What's wrong, buddy?" David asked, cutting his own chicken slowly, methodically. Ben shrugged. "I heard something in my closet last night, like someone talking really soft." Laura's fork paused midair. "What kind of talking?" she asked. Ben looked down. "I don't know, just words. Like stay here." David chuckled, but it sounded forced. "Probably a dream, kiddo. Closets don't talk." Ben nodded, but didn't look convinced, taking a small bite of potato. That evening, the family sat in the living room watching a nature documentary about whales. The TV flickered once, then twice. David got up, checked the cables, and found them. "Secure. Old wiring," he muttered, sitting back down. But then the lamp in the corner turned off by itself. Laura flipped the switch back on, her hands shaking slightly. "We need to get an electrician," she said, writing it on a notepad where she kept her to-do list. "Buy milk, schedule dentist for Mia, fix fence." The lamp stayed on, but the air felt heavy, like before a storm. The next day, Laura decided to talk to the neighbors again. She walked next door to the Harlow's house, carrying a plate of cookies she baked as an excuse. Mrs. Harlow, a thin woman with white hair tied in a bun, invited her in for tea. The living room smelled of lavender and a cat curled up on the couch, settling in okay. Mrs. Harlow asked, pouring tea into chip cups. Laura nodded, then hesitated. Have you ever noticed anything odd about our house? Mrs. Harlow's smile faded slightly. Well, it's old. Houses like that have stories. The Ellis family, back in the 1920s, had a tragedy. Henry Ellis, the father, died up in that attic. They said he fell, but some folks thought he was pushed by something. Town gossip, you know. She sipped her tea. Looking away, Laura's stomach tightened, but she thanked her and left the cookies untouched on the table. Back home, Laura didn't tell David about the conversation. He was practical, would call it nonsense. Instead, she vacuumed the living room, the hum of the machine drowning out her thoughts. She moved furniture to clean under it, finding a small button under the couch. It was old, maybe from a coat, with a strange carved pattern. She put it in a drawer, thinking it was junk left by previous owners. That afternoon, she drove to the grocery store, buying chicken, carrots, and cereal. Her mind replaying Mrs. Harlow's words. At the checkout, the cashier, a middle-aged woman named Judy, made small talk. You're in the Maple Lane house, right? Pretty place. But it's been empty a long time. Laura nodded, not wanting to ask more. David was noticing things too. In the garage, his tools kept moving. His hammer was on the workbench one day, then in a drawer the next. He spent an hour organizing everything, lining up screwdrivers and wrenches in neat rows, muttering about needing better storage. He checked the basement again, shining his flashlight into corners. The air was damp, and he found an old trunk with a rusty lock. Inside were papers, bills from decades ago, a faded photo of a stern-looking man in a suit. David put it back, locking the trunk. Just old stuff, he told himself. Climbing the stairs, the kids were getting jumpy. Mia started sleeping with her desk lamp on, saying the dark felt wrong. Ben stopped playing in his room alone, preferring the living room where he could see everyone. One night, as Laura tucked him in, he whispered, the talking's louder now. It says mine sometimes. Laura's heart skipped, but she kissed his forehead and said, it's just the house creaking, sweetie. She closed his door, then stood in the hallway, listening. Nothing. But the air felt cold, even though the heater was on. The family went to church that Sunday, a small brick building in town. The sermon was about faith, but Laura barely listened, her eyes on the stained glass windows. Afterward, they had lunch at a diner, burgers and fries, with milkshakes for the kids. Mia spilled ketchup on her shirt and groaned, while Ben slurped his shake loudly. It was normal, boring even, but Laura felt a knot in her chest. Back home, they played a board game, Monopoly, laughing as David pretended to be a ruthless landlord. But when they went to bed, the house fell to quiet, like it was holding its breath. One morning, David found his car keys in the fridge, next to the milk. He stared, confused, then laughed it off, showing Laura. I must have been half asleep, he said. She forced a smile but remembered the glass in the sink. That day, while dusting the mantel, she noticed the picture frame, the one that tilted before, was now upside down. She fixed it, her hands unsteady. At dinner tacos with store-bought shells, she mentioned it to David. He frowned, chewing slowly. Maybe the kids. Mia and Ben shook their heads, mouths full. The whispers came more often now, especially at night. Laura heard them in the kitchen while washing dishes, a low murmur like someone talking in another room. She turned off the faucet to listen, but it stopped. David heard it once while reading the newspaper, a sports section about the local high school team. He folded the paper and checked the windows closed. Mia woke up one night to a voice saying, "Get out, clear as day." She ran to her parents' room, crying. Laura held her, saying it was a nightmare, but Mia insisted it was real. The family tried to keep busy. David painted the porch, a light gray to replace the peeling blue. Laura planted flowers in the front yard, marigolds and daisies. Mia joined the school book club, reading a novel about horses. Ben drew more pictures, taping them to his wall. But the house wouldn't let them forget. A door slammed upstairs one afternoon when no one was there. Laura was vacuuming and jumped, unplugging the machine. She climbed the stairs, heart pounding, and found Mia's door closed tight. She opened it, nothing inside but Mia's neatly made bed. By the end of the month, the Thompsons were on edge. David spent hours online, searching for old house noises and how to fix drafts. He found articles about pipes and wind, nothing about whispers. Laura started keeping a journal, writing down every odd event, the glass, the keys, the frame. She didn't show it to David, afraid he'd think she was overreacting. The kids stopped talking about it, but Mia kept her lamp on, and Ben slept with his fire truck under his pillow. One night, as they ate dinner, pork chops and applesauce, the lights flickered again. David sighed, adding electrician to his mental list. But then a cold breeze swept through the dining room, rustling the napkins. Ben dropped his fork, eyes wide. "It's him," he whispered. "Who?" Laura asked, her voice sharp. Ben didn't answer, just stared at the wall. The whispers came again, louder, saying mine over and over. Like a broken record, the family sat frozen, the food growing cold on their plates. The Thompson family's life in Willow Creek trudged along. Their days filled with the monotony of work, school, and chores. But the house on Maple Lane was no longer a place of comfort. The whispers that had started as faint murmurs now lingered like an unwelcome guest, and the strange incidents were harder to dismiss. David left for work each morning, as tinily knotted, his briefcase stuffed with spreadsheets and tax forms. He drove the minivan through the quiet streets, passing the same gas station and bakery. His mind on client meetings. Laura's shifts at the clinic were busy checking temperatures, updating charts, soothing nervous patients. Mia struggled through algebra homework, her pencil scratching out equations, while Ben drew fire trucks in art class, his crayons wearing down to stubs. Yet, beneath this routine, fear was creeping in, slow and steady, like damp seeping through the walls. One morning, Laura was making breakfast pancakes with syrup, the smell filling the kitchen when she noticed 3 faint scratches on her forearm. They were thin, like cat scratches, but the family didn't own a cat. She touched them, wincing, and pulled her sleeve down before David or the kids saw. She flipped pancakes onto plates, her hands trembling slightly, and called everyone to eat. David read the news on his phone, scrolling through headlines about local politics. Mia picked at her food, texting Sophie about a school project. Ben dripped syrup on his shirt, giggling as Laura wiped it off with a napkin. No one mentioned the house, but the silence felt heavy, like they were all waiting for something to happen after breakfast. David headed to the garage to work on a wobbly chair. He tightened screws, his toolbox open on the floor, but noticed his pliers were missing. He searched every shelf, muttering about losing things, and found them under a pile of rags he hadn't touched. He shook his head, blaming his own forgetfulness, and went back to the chair. Meanwhile, Laura drove the kids to school. Mia's bus stop was a 10-minute walk, but she hated the early mornings, so Laura dropped her off. Ben chattered about a spelling test, clutching his backpack. On her way back, Laura stopped at the library, a small brick building with creaky floors, to look up the house's history. She wasn't sure why, but Mrs. Harlow's story about Henry Ellis nagged at her. The librarian, Mr. Carver, was an older man with thick glasses and a habit of humming while he worked. Laura asked about old town records, keeping her voice casual. He led her to a dusty corner with bound newspapers and microfiche. "Maple Lane, you say? Let's see," he said, pulling out a heavy book of property records. Laura spent an hour flipping through yellowed pages, her eyes scanning dates and names. She found an entry from 1923, Henry Ellis, 38, owned the house with his wife, Clara, and their daughter, Rose. A fire in the attic killed Henry, the report said, caused by a faulty lantern. The family moved away after. Another article from a local paper mentioned rumors that Henry's death wasn't an accident. Neighbors claimed he'd been acting strange, talking about voices before the fire. Laura wrote it all down in her journal, her handwriting shaky, then thanked Mr. Carver and left Dot at home. She vacuumed the living room, moving the couch to clean underneath. She found a small key, tarnished and old, tucked in a corner. It didn't fit any lock she could find. Front door, back door, basement. She added it to the drawer with a strange button, telling herself it was nothing. That afternoon, she picked up the kids from school. Mia was quiet, her earbuds in, listening to music. Ben talked about a new friend, Tommy, who liked toy cars. Too, Laura smiled, but her mind was on the library, on Henry Ellis and his voices. That evening, the family ate dinner lasagna from a frozen tray with garlic bread and salad. David complained about a long meeting at work, something about a client's taxes. Mia asked for new sneakers, saying hers were worn out. Ben dropped a piece of bread on the floor, and when Laura bent to pick it up, she felt a cold spot near the dining table, like stepping into a freezer. She stood up quickly, her heart racing, but said nothing. After dinner, they watched a sitcom, The Canned. Laughter echoing in the room. The TV flickered again, and David sighed, checking the outlet. "We really need that electrician," he said, jotting it on a sticky note. But the house wouldn't stay quiet. That night, Mia woke up to a tugging on her blanket, like someone pulling it off. She sat up, her lamp casting shadows on the wall. Nothing was there, but her door was open, even though she'd closed it. She ran to her parents' room, shaking Laura awake. "Something's in my room," she whispered, her voice trembling. Laura checked, flashlight in hand, but found only Mia's messy bed and scattered books. "It was a dream, sweetie," she said, tucking Mia back in. But Mia didn't sleep, staring at the ceiling until morning. Ben was scared too. He told Laura at breakfast cereal and milk. The box left open on the counter that he saw a shadow in his closet. It was tall, like a man. He said, spoon halfway to his mouth. David, sipping coffee, said, "Shadows play tricks. Buddy, maybe it was your coat." But Ben shook his head, insistent. Laura's scratches itched under her sleeve, and she kept quiet, pouring more cereal for Ben. David decided to check the house again. He went to the attic this time, the door creaking. As he opened it, the air was musty, the single window covered in grime. He found nothing but cobwebs and a broken chair, but the floorboards felt uneven, like they'd been repaired poorly. He remembered the library story about the fire and shivered, though he told himself it was just the cold. Downstairs, he told Laura everything seemed fine, but his voice lacked conviction. The next day, Laura was at the clinic, taking a patient's blood pressure, when she felt a sharp pain on her leg. In the bathroom, she found more scratches, this time deeper, on her calf. She covered them with a bandage, telling herself it was an accident, maybe from brushing against furniture. But her hands shook as she wrote in her journal that night, listing the scratches, the key, the whispers. She hid the journal in her nightstand, not wanting David to see Dot at school. Mia was distracted again. In history class, she doodled the house again, adding a shadowy figure in the window. Sophie noticed and asked what was wrong, but Mia just shrugged. After school, she helped Laura with chores, folding towels in the laundry room. A basket tipped over by itself, spilling clothes on the floor. Mia gasped, and Laura rushed to pick it up, saying, "Clumsy me." But she hadn't touched it. Ben stopped playing in the backyard, saying it felt weird. He stayed inside, drawing at the kitchen table. One of his pictures showed a man with no face, standing in a doorway. Laura saw it and felt her stomach drop, but she praised his creativity and taped it to the fridge. That night, during dinner meatloaf and peas, the chandelier above the table swayed slightly, though there was no breeze. David stared at it, then got up to check the windows. All closed. Maybe an earthquake, he said. But his voice was uneasy. The whispers were constant now, especially at night. Laura heard them in the bathroom, brushing her teeth, a low voice saying mine over and over. She spat out toothpaste and ran water to drown it out. David heard it while locking the front door, a murmur from the living room. He checked, finding nothing but the couch and TV. Mia woke up to get out again, louder this time, and spent the night in Ben's room, both kids huddled under blankets. Ben said the shadow man was angry, but he didn't know why. The family tried to keep going. David worked late, balancing books for a new client. Laura bought groceries, eggs, bread, apples, her list written in neat handwriting. Mia joined a study group, staying after school to finish a project. Ben played with Tommy at recess, trading toy cars. But every night, the house reminded them it wasn't theirs. A book fell off a shelf in the living room, landing open to a blank page. Laura found her journal on the kitchen counter, though she left it in her room. David's keys went missing again, turning up in the basement. The scratches on Laura's leg didn't heal, red and raw under the bandage. One Sunday, they went to the park, hoping fresh air would help. Mia read under a tree. Ben played on the swings, and David and Laura sat on a bench, sipping coffee from a thermos. Maybe we're imagining things, David said, but Laura didn't reply, thinking of the library records. Back home, they made dinner spaghetti with marinara sauce, a family favorite, but as they ate, a glass slid across the table, stopping. At the edge, the family stared, forks frozen. Ben whispered, "It's him again." Laura grabbed his hand, her heart pounding. David stood up, face pale, and said, "We need to do something." The Thompson family could no longer pretend everything was fine in their Maple Lane home. The whispers, the scratches, the objects moving on their own, it was too much. David, usually so practical, admitted over breakfast one morning scrambled eggs and toast, the kitchen smelling of butter, that they needed help. Laura nodded, her coffee untouched, her eyes tired from sleepless nights. Mia and Ben sat quietly, picking at their food, the air heavy with unspoken fear. The house felt like it was closing in, its creaks and shadows no longer just quirks of an old building. Laura had been researching online after her clinic shifts, scrolling through forums about hauntings while David balanced spreadsheets in his office. She found a website for Alex and Elena Voss, a husband and wife team of paranormal investigators based a few hours away. Their site mentioned real cases, like a haunted farmhouse in Ohio and an apartment in Boston, with testimonials from families who swore the Vosses had saved them. Laura emailed them that evening, typing out every detail. The whispers saying mine, the scratches on her arm and leg, Mia's tug blankets, Ben's shadow man. She hit send, her hands shaking, then closed her laptop and washed dishes plates, crusted with spaghetti sauce from dinner to distract herself. 2 days later, Alex Voss replied. His email was short but professional, promising to visit the weekend. Laura told David, who frowned but agreed, saying, "If it makes you feel better, let's try it." Mia overheard and asked, "Are they ghost hunters?" Her voice a mix of curiosity and fear. Ben clutched his fire truck, saying nothing. Laura explained they were just people who knew about strange things. Hoping to sound calm, the Vosses arrived on Saturday morning, pulling up in a gray van packed with equipment. Alex was in his 50s, with short gray hair and a serious face, carrying a heavy duffel bag. Elena was younger, with dark hair and a braid, holding a clipboard and a warm smile. They shook hands with David and Laura on the porch, the paint still fresh from David's weekend project. The kids peeked from the living room window, Mia texting Sophie about weird people at the house. Ben hiding behind the couch. Inside, the Vosses sat at the dining table, the same one where the glass had slid days before. Laura offered coffee, brewing a fresh pot, the machine gurgling as they talked. Alex asked for a full account, his voice steady like a doctor's. Laura listed everything, her voice cracking when she mentioned the scratches. David added the missing tools and keys, trying to sound skeptical but failing. Mia, sitting cross-legged on the floor, admitted to the voice saying get out. Ben whispered about the shadow man, his eyes on the floor. Elena wrote it all down, her pen scratching on paper, and said, "This sounds like a strong presence. We'll need to stay a few days." They unpacked their gear in the living room, moving the couch to make space. Alex set up cameras on tripods, one facing the hallway, another in the kitchen. Elena placed audio recorders in every room, small black devices with blinking red lights. They had an EMF meter to detect energy spikes, a thermometer for cold spots, and a notebook for observations. David watched, arms crossed, asking, "Does this stuff really work?" Alex nodded, explaining how electromagnetic fields could show spirit activity. His tone matter of fact. Laura felt a flicker of hope, folding a pile of laundry towels and socks to keep her hands busy. The first night, the Vosses stayed up, monitoring screens in the living room while the family tried to sleep. Laura made dinner chicken, stir fry, with rice. The kitchen warmed from cooking, but everyone ate quickly, the air tense. After, they watched a cartoon to calm the kids, but the TV flickered again, making Ben jump. Elena checked the EMF meter, which spiked near the dining room. "Something's here," she said, her voice low. Alex recorded the time, 9:47 p.m. Around midnight, the whispers started again, louder, coming from the walls. The recorder in the hallway caught mine, repeated in a gravelly voice. Laura, lying awake, heard it through her bedroom door. She gripped David's hand, who was awake too, staring at the ceiling, downstairs. Elena felt a cold breeze on her neck, though the windows were shut. She marked it in her notebook, her handwriting neat despite her quickening pulse. Alex's camera caught a shadow moving across the kitchen, too tall to be human, vanishing into the pantry. He replayed the footage, showing the family in the morning. Mia gasped, and Ben hid his face in Laura's shirt. The next day, Sunday, the Vosses interviewed the neighbors. Laura went with them, carrying a thermos of tea. Mrs. Harlow repeated the story about Henry Ellis, adding that his wife, Clara, had claimed he was not himself before the fire. He'd sit in the attic for hours, talking to no one, she said, feeding her cat. Another neighbor, Mr. Jensen, a retired mechanic, mentioned lights flickering in the house years ago, when it was empty. Laura wrote it all down in her journal, her pen pressing hard into the paper. Back at the house, things got worse. While Laura was at the grocery store buying milk, bread, and apples, a picture frame crashed off the living room wall, shattering glass across the floor. David swept it up, his hands unsteady, muttering about loose nails. Mia, doing homework in her room, felt a hand brush her shoulder. She screamed, running downstairs, where Elena calmed her, saying, "It's trying to get attention." Ben refused to go upstairs, playing with his fire truck in the kitchen instead. That evening, during dinner, pizza delivered from town, the Vosses explained their theory. Henry Ellis likely never left, Alex said, chewing a slice slowly. His death was sudden, tied to the house. He's angry, claiming it is his. Elena added, "We've seen this in other cases. Spirits latch onto places they love or hated." David frowned, picking at his pizza crust. "So what do we do?" Laura's voice was sharp, her scratches burning under her sleeve. The Vosses planned a deeper investigation that night. They set up salt lines at doorways, a trick from old folklore, and burned sage, the smoke curling in the air. Laura helped, lighting matches, her hands shaky. The family stayed in the living room, watching the Vosses work. At 1 a.m., the EMF meter spiked again, and a chair in the dining room tipped over with a crash. Ben cried, clinging to Laura. Mia's eyes were wide, her phone forgotten. Alex held up a cross, speaking firmly. Henry, this isn't your home anymore. The whispers roared back, mine. Shaking the walls, Elena sprinkled holy water, the air hissing like steam. A cold wind swept through, knocking over a lamp. David caught it before it hit the floor, his face pale. The Vosses kept going, chanting prayers from a worn book. Mia felt a tug on her hair, sharp and real. She yelped, and Laura pulled her close. The activity stopped around 3 a.m. The house silent again. Alex checked his equipment. Cameras caught more shadows. Recorders picked up fragmented words. Stay, mine, fire. He looked at Elena, his expression grim. This is one of our toughest, he said. The family barely slept. Laura made coffee at dawn, her hands clumsy, spilling grounds on the counter. David called in sick, unable to focus on work. Mia refused to go to school, sitting on the couch with a blanket. Ben drew a picture of the shadow man, darker this time, with jagged edges. The Vosses stayed, planning to return with more tools. As they left, Elena hugged Laura, saying, "We'll figure this out." But the house felt heavier, the air thick with something waiting. The air in the Thompson house on Maple Lane grew thicker, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The family clung to their routines, desperate for normalcy. But the presence of Alex and Elena Voss, the paranormal investigators, only heightened the sense that something was deeply wrong. David went through the motions of his days, checking emails and sipping coffee. But his eyes darted to the corners of rooms. Laura's shifts at the clinic were mechanical, measuring pulses, handing out prescriptions, her mind replaying the shadow on the Voss's camera. Mia stopped texting Sophie, her phone lying untouched on her desk, while Ben clutched his fire truck so tightly the paint chipped. The house was no longer a home. It was a battlefield. The Vosses returned on Monday with more equipment, their van parked crookedly in the driveway. Alex carried a heavy case filled with motion sensors and a spirit box, a device that scanned radio frequencies for voices. Elena had a leather-bound book of rituals, its pages worn from use, and a bag of salt for protection. They set up in the living room, moving the coffee table to make space. Laura watched, folding laundry, Ben socks, Mia's sweaters to keep her hands busy. David asked, "What's the plan now?" His voice sharp with exhaustion. Alex explained they'd try to communicate with Henry Ellis, the spirit tied to the house, and convince him to leave. If that fails, Elena added softly, "We may need to force him out." The family tried to keep busy. Laura made breakfast oatmeal with sliced bananas, the kitchen warm from the stove. David drove to work but came home early, unable to focus on spreadsheets. Mia stayed home from school, claiming a headache, and sat on the couch with a book she didn't read. Ben drew at the kitchen table, his crayon scratching out images of a dark figure with no face, its arms too long. Laura taped the drawing to the fridge, her stomach twisting, but said, "Nice work, buddy," her voice hollow. That afternoon, the Vosses began their work. They placed motion sensors in the hallway and attic, small lights blinking when triggered. The spirit box crackled in the living room, spitting out static and garbled words. Alex spoke into it. "Henry Ellis, why are you here?" The box hissed. Then a voice rasped, "My house." Laura froze, a dish towel in her hand. David, sitting nearby, gripped the armrest of the couch. Mia and Ben huddled together, Ben's fire truck forgotten on the floor. The activity escalated quickly. At dusk, while Laura was chopping carrots for dinner beef stew, the smell of onions filling the air, a knife slid off the counter, clattering to the floor. She jumped, checking her fingers, unharmed but shaken. Upstairs, Mia screamed. The family and the Vosses ran to her room. She was on her bed, clutching her arm, where red welts appeared like claw marks. "Something grabbed me," she sobbed. Elena examined the marks, her face grim, and sprinkled salt around the bed. "It's targeting the vulnerable," she whispered. To Alex, that night, the Vosses held a seance in the dining room. They lit candles, the flames flickering despite closed windows, and placed a cross in the center of the table. The family sat in a circle, holding hands. Laura's palms were sweaty, David's gripped it tight. Mia's eyes were wide, Ben's head bowed. Alex spoke, "Henry Ellis, you don't belong here. Move on." The air grew cold, the thermometer dropping 10 degrees. The spirit box crackled, spitting out "never" and a low growl. Then Mia gasped, her body jerking. Her eyes rolled back, showing only whites, and she spoke in a voice not her own. "This is mine. You leave." Laura screamed, reaching for Mia. But Elena held her back. "Don't break the circle." Alex chanted prayers, his voice steady but strained, holding up the cross. The candles flickered wildly, one going out. Ben cried, "Stop it," and the table shook. Dishes rattling. Elena sprinkled holy water, the air hissing like a kettle. Mia's body slumped, her eyes normal again, but she was shaking, tears streaming down her face. Laura pulled her close, sobbing, while David stared, his face pale. The Vosses regrouped, checking their equipment. The motion sensors in the attic had gone off repeatedly. Though no one was up there, Alex reviewed the spirit box recordings, catching phrases like "fire" and "stay." He told the family Henry's tied to the attic where he died. His anger's keeping him here. Elena added, "He's lashing out, especially at Mia. She's sensitive to him." They decided to focus their efforts upstairs, planning a ritual to cleanse the attic the next day. The family was on edge. Laura called in sick, unable to leave the kids. She made sandwiches for lunch, peanut butter and jelly, the bread slightly. Staland watched Mia closely, who was quiet, drawing in her notebook. Ben refused to go near the stairs, playing in the living room instead. David tried to work from home, his laptop open to tax forms, but kept glancing at the ceiling where the attic door was. The Vosses spent hours preparing, reading from their ritual book, marking the attic floor with salt and chalk symbols. That evening, during dinner, macaroni and cheese. The kids' favorite, the chandelier swung violently, glass clinking. David jumped up, checking for drafts, but found none. A cold wind swept through, knocking over a glass of milk. Ben screamed, hiding under the table. Mia stared blankly, her fork still, as if listening to something no one else heard. Laura grabbed her hand, whispering, "You're okay, honey." But Mia's eyes were distant, unsettling. The Vosses began the attic ritual at midnight. They carried candles, holy water, and a small bell. Its chime meant to disrupt negative energy. The family stayed downstairs, huddled in the living room, a cartoon playing on the TV to distract Ben. The attic was dark, the air heavy with dust. Alex and Elena chanted, "Henry Ellis, release this house, find peace." The floorboards creaked, and a shadow moved across the wall, tall and jagged. The bell fell from Elena's hand, rolling into a corner. A voice roared, "Mine," and the attic door slammed shut, trapping them inside. Downstairs, Laura heard the slam and ran to the stairs, David behind her. They pounded on the door, shouting, "For the Vosses." Mia and Ben followed, crying. The door wouldn't budge, locked from the inside. Then Mia froze, her voice low and unnatural again. "He won't let you in." Laura shook her, screaming her name, but Mia's eyes were blank. David kicked the door, his foot aching, until it finally burst open. The Vosses were pale, the candles out, but unharmed. The shadow was gone, but the air felt wrong, like a storm about to break. They retreated downstairs, the Vosses shaken. Alex said, "He's stronger than we thought. We need more time." Elena checked Mia, who was herself again, but exhausted, her welts redder. Laura's scratches burned, new ones appearing on her wrist. Ben clung to his fire truck, whispering, "He's mad at us." The Vosses stayed the night, sleeping on the couch, their equipment still running. The family slept in the master bedroom together, blankets piled high, but no one rested. The next morning, Laura made coffee, spilling grounds again. David didn't go to work. Staring at his phone without seeing it, Mia drew the shadow man in her notebook, darker and larger. Her hands trembling, Ben refused to leave Laura's side. His drawings left untouched, the Vosses reviewed their footage, finding a clear image of a figure in the attic, its face blurred but menacing. "We're dealing with a malevolent spirit," Alex said. "We'll try again, but it's dangerous." The family ate breakfast cereal, the milk almost gone in silence. The house creaked, the whispers faint but constant, like a heartbeat in the walls. Laura's journal was full now, pages of incidents, scratches, voices, Mia's trance. She hid it under her pillow, afraid it would move again. David called an electrician, hoping for a normal explanation, but the man found no wiring issues. The Vosses prepared for another ritual, their faces grim, knowing the spirit wouldn't go quietly. The Thompson family was exhausted, their lives on Maple Lane reduced to a haze of fear and sleepless nights. The presence of Alex and Elena Voss, the paranormal investigators, offered a sliver of hope, but the house felt like a cage, its walls pulsing with the anger of Henry Ellis. David barely touched his work, his laptop open to untouched spreadsheets, his coffee cold in its mug. Laura moved through her days like a ghost herself, her nursing shifts replaced by constant worry. Her journal now a thick record of horror scratches, whispers, Mia's possession. Mia stayed close to her parents, her books and phone forgotten, while Ben clung to his chip fire truck, refusing to be alone. The house was no longer theirs. It belonged to the shadow that refused to leave. The Vosses spent the day, after the attic incident, preparing for a final ritual. They sat at the dining table, surrounded by empty coffee cups and scattered notes, planning meticulously. Alex pored over town records Laura had copied from the library, finding a letter from Clara Ellis, Henry's wife, dated 1924. It described Henry's obsession with the attic, how he'd mutter about protecting the house before the fire that killed him. Elena believed this tied him to the space, his anger fueled by loss. "We need to break the bond," she said, her voice steady but tired. They decided to perform a cleansing ritual in the attic, using every tool they had: holy water, salt, prayers, and a relic, a small silver cross said to hold protective power. Laura tried to keep the family distracted. She made breakfast pancakes, the batter lumpy from her distracted mixing, while David read the newspaper, his eyes skimming the same sports article repeatedly. Mia helped set the table, her movements slow, her welt still red on her arm. Ben ate quietly, his fire truck on his lap, his eyes darting to the ceiling. After breakfast, Laura cleaned the kitchen, scrubbing counters until her hands ached, while David mowed the lawn, the hum of the mower a brief escape from the house's silence. Mia sat on the couch, sketching the house in her notebook, the windows dark and jagged. Ben played nearby, rolling his truck across the floor, but stopped when he heard a faint whisper from the hallway. "Mine." The Vosses gathered the family in the living room that afternoon. Alex explained the plan. They performed the ritual at midnight, when spiritual energy peaked. "It's risky," he admitted, adjusting his glasses. "Henry's strong, but we faced worse." Elena handed Laura a small vial of holy water, saying, "Keep this close." David frowned, skeptical but desperate, and asked, "Will this really work?" Elena nodded, but her eyes were uncertain. They spent the day preparing, placing salt lines at every door, burning sage until the air was thick with smoke. Laura helped, lighting matches, her hands trembling. Mia and Ben stayed in the living room, watching a cartoon, the volume low to avoid disturbing the preparations. Dinner was quiet: roast chicken, potatoes, and carrots, the food tasteless to everyone. Laura cut her chicken slowly, her scratches itching under her sleeve. David pushed his plate away, his appetite gone. Mia stared at her food, whispering, "I feel him watching." Ben dropped his fork, saying, "He's upstairs." The Vosses exchanged looks, and Alex said, "We'll handle it tonight." After dinner, Laura washed dishes. The clink of plates loud in the silent house. David checked the locks, a habit now, though no lock could keep out what was inside. At 11 p.m., the Vosses led the family to the attic stairs. The air was heavy, the house creaking like it was alive. They carried candles, the flame steady for now, and the silver cross, which Elena held tightly. Laura kept Mia and Ben close, their hands cold in hers. David followed, his jaw tight, gripping a flashlight. The attic door creaked open, revealing darkness and dust. The uneven floorboards, where Henry had died, seemed to pulse underfoot. Alex set up a circle of salt, placing the cross in the center. Elena began chanting, her voice soft but firm, reading from her ritual book. "Henry Ellis, we release you. Find peace." The response was immediate. The air grew freezing, the thermometer dropping 20 degrees. The candles flickered, one extinguishing with a hiss. A low growl echoed, "Mine," and the attic shook, dust falling from the ceiling. Mia gasped, clutching Laura, her eyes wide. Ben whimpered, hiding behind David. Alex raised the cross, shouting, "You don't belong here." Elena sprinkled holy water, the air sizzling. A shadow formed in the corner, tall and jagged, its edges blurring into the darkness. It moved toward Mia, who screamed, her voice breaking. Laura pulled Mia back, clutching the vial of holy water. David swung the flashlight, its beam cutting through the shadow but revealing nothing. The Vosses kept chanting, their voices rising over the growls. The shadow lunged, knocking over the cross. Elena grabbed it, her hand steady, and resumed the prayer. The air grew heavier, the whispers now a roar. "My house, mine." Objects in the attic hold boxes. A broken chair shifted, scraping across the floor. Ben cried, "Make it stop," and Laura held him, her heart pounding. Then Mia froze, her body rigid. Her eyes rolled back again, and she spoke in that deep, unnatural voice. "You can't take it," Laura screamed, shaking her. But Elena shouted, "Keep going." Alex poured more holy water, the shadow recoiling. The floorboards cracked, a sound like breaking bones. Elena rang the bell, its chime sharp and piercing. The shadow shrank, its form dissolving into the wall. Mia collapsed, gasping, her eyes normal but filled with tears. The air warm, the growls fading to silence. The Vosses checked their equipment. The EMF meter was flat, the spirit box silent. Alex wiped sweat from his brow, saying, "I think he's gone." Elena nodded, but her eyes scanned the attic, wary. They led the family downstairs, the candles now steady. Laura hugged Mia and Ben, her tears mixing with theirs. David sat on the couch, head in his hands, muttering, "Is it over?" The Vosses packed their gear, promising to review the recordings, but their faces showed relief. The next morning, the house felt lighter. Laura made coffee, her hands steadier, though she still spilled grounds. David went to work, his tie slightly crooked, determined to reclaim normalcy. Mia went to school, her backpack heavy with books, while Ben played in the living room, his fire truck rolling smoothly. Laura cleaned the attic, sweeping dust and removing the salt lines. Her scratch is finally starting to heal. The whispers were gone, the air calm. Days passed, then weeks. The family settled back into their routines. Laura returned to the clinic, taking blood pressures and smiling at patients. David balanced his spreadsheets, his focus returning. Mia rejoined her book club, reading about horses again. Ben drew new pictures, fire trucks, not shadows taping them to the fridge. They had barbecues in the backyard, inviting the Harlows, who brought pie. The neighbors stopped whispering about the house, and Willow Creek felt like home again. But sometimes, late at night, Laura would pause while locking the doors, hearing a faint creak from the attic. She never told David, afraid to break the fragile peace. Mia kept her lamp on, just in case, and Ben slept with his fire truck under his pillow. The Vosses sent a final report. confirming no activity on their recordings. But Elena's last call had a warning: keep that holy water close. The family never spoke of Henry Ellis, but the house held a secret, a shadow that might still linger in the walls.